Hello and welcome to Sip Sip Hooray, the podcast for wine lovers and the wine curious, where we strip away wine's snobby, bougie rep to meet the really fun and really interesting people that make the wine world hum. It's ironic, but lots of folks think they don't actually know enough about wine to confer with a sommelier. Heck, most of us worry that we're even saying the word sommelier wrong. But these wine experts truly are your friend, and they're on your side when it comes to learning about wine. Perhaps none more so than our guest today. He's an internationally renowned sommelier and a truly down-to-earth guy whose passion for wine, music, and film has made him a beloved figure in the wine world. Some of his gigs over the years have earned him the moniker Sommelier to the Stars because he's helped guide celebrities toward exceptional wines and unforgettable tasting experiences. He also hosts a fun YouTube series called The Varietal Show. Chris Sawyer is one of those people whose phone contact list must be miles long. He seems to know everyone. Or maybe it's just that everyone wants to know Chris. We're excited for you to get to know him today. We are the two Marys who like to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm Mary Babbitt.
I'm Mary Orland. SawyerSomm is in the house.
Hello.
Wine's most prolific film and music pairing expert is here. Yes, I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. Our paths first crossed when Chris was at the Carneros Bistro and Wine Bar at the Lodge in Sonoma, where he was the sommelier. And there's just not enough time to describe Chris Sawyer's impact on the wine world. I've known him for more than 20 years and am in awe of his ever-expanding circle of influence. He's got boundless energy and passion for wine. Plus, Chris has got a great sense of style, and his social media pictures are epic. And it's not a wine event until SawyerSomm shows up. Chris is always innovating and throughout his career has turned the traditional role of sommelier on its head in the best way possible. Chris, welcome to Sip Sip Hooray.
Thank you, Mary. Sorry for jumping in there a little early.
No, that's fine.
I'm so excited to be with you two.
We're thrilled to have you with us today, Chris. I'm not even sure where to start because you have your fingers in so many different things. What would you say keeps you the most busy? Can you describe your day job?
Well, not really. I just have so many projects. I think it's being creative that really helps or it describes me the best. There's a lot of things that have been done, but I don't do things inside the box. I create new things that are just seem like wonderful and why didn't we do this before? And I think that those are the kinds of things that I get really excited about, is really helping, now that, I've been a sommelier for over 30 years, I've been a wine writer. I'm one of those rare people that was actually the journalist first and then became the sommelier. You'll find a lot of sommeliers out there that kind of go, okay, now I'm going to just go into writing, or they're just going to sell wines and make, six figures. So for me, it's really working with different individuals and different wineries, different wine regions, being on the great show like this, and really educating people, doing things like I do at the Sonoma International Film Festival, where I became the world's first ever film festival sommelier, or judging competitions. So every week is really different, you guys. Really.
Yeah.
I'm out of breath just thinking about all that.
It's like, Chris, you are everywhere. You're at tasting events. You are judging. You are hosting parties. You have secret sessions in your cellar. I mean, what don't you do?
Well, I don't know yet because I haven't conquered that. But, I just think that wine is so applicable to life, just in general. My start really came from my time at University of California, Davis. Actually, let me go back one
Sure.
step before that, why I appreciated wine in the first place. I had this friend. Some of you guys might know that out there in the world is her name is Winona Ryder. So I went to high school
Well,
with Winona Ryder. This is a real inside story, you guys. So
okay.
watch out.
Hey,
I
Um,
haven't heard this one yet.
I
yeah.
know.
So
Do
her
tell.
brother used to buy, let's just say, alcohol for us when we were kids, and one time he did not answer his mobile or his what do we call it? Pager, you guys. For those of
Oh,
you out there
remember
in society
those.
might not know what a pager is. It's this thing that rang on the side of your belt. But we were going to watch a movie that night, and I asked Winona Noni to me, when we were in high school, do is there anything laying around here that you might suggest instead, since your brother is not here? And it ended up where I went down to the cellar and grabbed a French bottle of wine, and we watched this movie called Name of the Rose. It's an amazing movie, and it had Christian Slater and
Oh, yeah.
obviously Sean Connery in it. She was going to be in a movie with Christian Slater, and I started watching that movie, and it got really good, and the wine started getting really good. And I was so fascinated by that wine because, all the wines we had gotten for the girls back then in the 1.5 liter bottles was, crap at the end of the day, and it was
Yeah.
like vinegar and you didn't want to drink it. I won't even cook with that stuff now. But to be really honest, it was Lynch Bage. It was a French great producer from Bordeaux, and little would I know, I'd actually go stay with them one time after I told them the same story, and they, I remember we checked into their winery, and they said, "Oh, Chris, this is such a great story." I said, "Great. Will you tell us where we should go to dinner in Pauillac?" And they said, "Oh, no, 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 no. You are going to dinner at our restaurant for 2 nights, Michelin star restaurant, and 37 courses later, and it's all because Winona's brother didn't show up because of the booze,
Isn't that
So
something? Wow. And
that's
what a prodigious bottle that was.
I know it's a really special part of my life. And so when I went to University of California, Davis, I was more the music expert. I was the critic of the newspaper at University of California, Davis, which was called the Aggie, the newspaper, and I also had a radio show. I needed more credits, and my teacher said, my professor said, Chris, you're doing great. Everyone loves reading your reviews of this guy named Beck and the Pixies and Smashing Pumpkins and all these kinds of things. But you do need more credit, so we're going to make you Mr. Science Guy now too. And Mr. Science Guy is going to go talk to the veterinarians here in the veterinarian school about cutting bulls' balls off and the newest techniques of doing that, and
How fun.
doctors about brain surgery, and this other department called viticulture and enology, and really talk to them about wine. Now, me growing up in Russian River Valley, which did have wine back then, of course, but it wasn't what it is today. And when I got to really interview great professors like Ann Noble and Carol Meredith, Ed Weber, I just fell in love with the idea that I could do something in wine, and I really kind of threw my thing for being the biggest music critic of the Bay Area out the door just to come back home and actually be in the wine industry.
That's fascinating. So
Wow.
you liked it better than the bull castration?
Yeah, the bull castration part, not a good subject. I mean, I
Yeah.
just like way too many photos too. Oh God.
Yeah.
I can't even know.
I don't know if there's enough wine to wipe out that memory.
That's a hard one, you guys.
So, but you kept your love of music. You've kept it alive all these years. So you're not the, a music critic exclusively, and you've let that critic piece maybe go by, but you've found a unique way to combine wine and music with friends. Can you tell us about that? Some of your fun gigs?
Yeah, well, I'm down in the cellar when I'm speaking with you today because I, of course, had to open a bottle of wine, and we'll talk about that wine in a few minutes. But down here, I'm looking up at the wall, and I have, about 1,000 records down here. It's all vinyl down here. I don't play CDs or anything down here because I really did collect these, and they all have certain certain energy in them, that I love. It's a funny thing, and if you guys, that really new records, it's kind of trending again. One of the great things about records is that they had an A side and a B side, and
Yes.
how, albums were really designed was to really catch you on the first side and then really hook you on the second side so you wanted to turn over the album again. So I would have parties down here, for 5 or 6 people, and well, by the end of the night, that's where we're talking about. By the end of the night, there were 5 and 6 people still left, and I'd pop a bottle open and we'd listen to side A, and then we'd figure out if we were going to flip that over, put another album on. But we were usually just had such a good talk for those 25 minutes as we listened to that with a great bottle of wine, and the wine was opening up, and then we figured out if we were going to flip it over or not. Eventually someone would usually go to the bathroom upstairs and come back and say, "You guys, it's actually light out now." That's how captivating an album and wine can be together, that you really just get into it and it starts great conversations. And I say the same thing about movies and everything. I think movies is a really great way to really define if a wine is a really great wine, because when you start the movie, you throw the CD in, or you get Netflix or whatever. You open the bottle before you pour the first glass, and you kick back and you push play. Great wines open up, so you're just getting a preview there. And in the movie, the guy, the main character, could be a jerk, but by the end you want to hug him, because it's called character development, and it happens in the glass as well. And so I think that's a really great way of
That's
testing
cool.
if a wine is really great, if it continues to change just like the characters do in the movies.
I
That's
love
cool.
that. That's
I
a
do
great way
too.
to describe wine.
Yeah, because I was
Exactly.
going to say, how do you, because you're known for your film and wine
Yep.
pairings, how do you go about that process of doing it? Like, for example, the Oscars are coming up,
Sure.
the Best Picture nominees. How do you go about pairing wine with those films?
Well, you gotta watch them first. Sometimes it's about the character and the main character. Sometimes it's rough at the beginning, that person's like very rough, and then it softens out. So something like Petite Sirah comes to mind right away. Big kind of tannic thing, but then it smooths out and it's so good. But sometimes I like it when there's multiple characters and you really kind of pair up kind of the super blend. Maybe it's a Cabernet based blend, but it's more done in a Bordeaux style. So it has Cabernet Franc and Malbec and Petit Verdot in it. And so really kind of putting characters together with that and how they kind of work together. Time movies they're kind of from the past are really cool, because then you can kind of pick out wines that were kind of popular back then. So something like Riesling back in the 70s was like what people were drinking, mainly women, because guys were still into beer and everything, and a lot of booze. So it's just kind of those time periods. I got to do during COVID. It was a really fun thing that I got to do. So Premier Napa is when they sell certain lots from the regions, and I did one with Rutherford where
Mhm.
I came up with the idea to do movie pairings, and so I had like Inglenook, and the winemaker and I really discussed that, and he really wanted to watch. He wanted to go back, and just because Inglenook is owned by Francis Ford Coppola, he really wanted to go back and actually use the reference to Cotton Club of all the
Okay.
movies of Francis Ford Coppola. So I was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, man, that's cool. But what he was saying there is that, Francis was kind of pissed because the movie was supposed to be about the black dancers, not the white dancers, like Richard Gere and his group. It was supposed to be about the black dancers, and so he redid that movie. And then, on that same panel, I had Frank family, and Rich Frank was the one that produced all sorts of movies, and including shows. That's that Happy Days. Anyone ever see that?
Oh, yeah.
Or Golden Girls, another classic of our childhoods. but also, so we had to do Beauty and the Beast because he produced it when he was at Disney. And
Aw.
I got to do one with Quintessa, and it was based on Humphrey Bogart's the adventures in oh gosh, why am I spacing on the name of the movie? But the Sierra Madres,
Oh, yeah.
the Sierra Madres, because it just, that what they gave me and what I did was Carmenere, which is a grape that's really known for Chile.
Mhm.
So it just kind of how we paired it out and these kinds of things was just brilliant. And it's really fun to watch that again. And we were putting costumes on the set, and we couldn't be, in public because it was COVID. But man, we had good sets.
Oh, that's
So
great.
it's being creative with these things. When I started with Sonoma County or Sonoma International Film Festival, one year I did a pairing with all 64 movies. And that
Wow.
was the year that Michael Keaton was with us. And to be really honest, I went up on stage. I've been the private sommelier for some great people. The Getty family is one of them. And John Lasseter from Pixar. I worked with him for 20 years. And so I got to go up on stage with John, and Michael was like sitting there like, who is this guy again? And everyone in the crowd was like, oh, that's Chris Sawyer. Ah.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so
sommelier to the stars right
yeah, so
there.
I pulled the little cover off this table, and I had a pairing for all these little cuts for us to taste up there on stage of Beetlejuice and Mr. Mom and all these great movies that he was in, and we did it. And I'll tell you this, you guys, it's really one of the greatest moments. Just when you go like, man, this was like so good what I did. Where he came to a party afterwards, and he walked right through the room like. All these people are like, Michael Keaton, and he came right to me and he said, man, you taught me so much up there on stage today. I just want to drink with you more. And so,
Oh,
That's
well,
great. Oh,
that's awesome. I mean,
yes.
and as I said, it's not an event until SawyerSomm shows up.
You've actually been in a film yourself, right?
a perfect vintage. It's really good. It was recorded back in 2015, 16. And, Tim Milos, he's a great guy, good friend of mine. And it's actually where I met him originally was where that wine won 100 points. It got 100 points. And
Yeah.
his brother was actually the one that filmed it. And
Oh, cool.
their film guy was from NASA. And I
Mm.
mean, like those aerials are awesome. I mean,
Mm.
I can't wait to see it again. But Angelina Mondavi's in it, and Elizabeth
Mhm.
Viana
Viana.
from Chimney Rock is in there, and all these different kinds of cool, like little small kind of producers that Timothy did the stuff for. But it really just gets into the nuts and bolts of it. And I didn't even know, I forgot about it. It was COVID time, and like I'm trying to do some stuff with the film festival, and they're like, "Oh, Sawyer, you're in a movie." I'm like, "Oh, huh? What? I don't even remember it." And it was filmed right up the road from me here, like
Really?
seriously, right off the freeway. I'm looking like I can see out my cellar window here barely, but the freeway's right down there, and it's a vineyard that was there, and I'm like. They wanted me to go to Napa. I didn't have time to do that because I had some other things. So they came over here. And so that's filmed like right near my house,
That's
even though
great.
it says it's like Napa. But it's really good. And like I was at Freeman Winery just recently, and I was just
Oh,
like
okay.
hanging out with Ken Freeman and his wife, and it was great. And they had these people, these kind of critics from LA that came in, and like this woman's like, "Oh, I know you." I'm like, "Oh, huh." Like, hi, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. And she's like, "Oh no, you were in this movie I saw on the airplane." I'm like, okay, perfect vintage. Oh yeah, you were in that. So like,
Yay,
it's
that's
just,
great.
it's cool.
What
Yeah,
a life.
very.
Well,
Chris, so you're so knowledgeable, but you make wine so easy to understand. And you, not only that, you make it something that people want to participate in and learn more, but you don't make people feel inadequate in any way.
Yeah, I treat everyone the same. If they're like super pros and they know everything about wine, which you'll never know anyways. If people think they know everything about wine, they're dorks, because you'll never know anything about, because every vintage changes. So how could you know everything about wine? It's impossible. So, I think that what I did, and this is where you were there with me, Mary Orland, of course, Mary, that you got to come and see me at the lodge at Sonoma, where I did over 500 classes for just guests. It was a wonderful opportunity where my GM came up to me and just said, Chris, what do you want to do here? And I said, I want to do classes for these guys, and not only, teach the guests here at the hotel, but also bring in the local community too. And those were very successful. I did over 500 of those, and then I started doing them for corporate groups and all sorts of things that I do quite often. I mean, it's that's why my schedules are always crazy, but it's because everyone has questions about wine. Everyone wants to know about new things, and I love kind of really getting people. One of the great ones that I've learned over the past few years is, oh, do you have a sweet wine here? That question. Like a lot of consumers out there, it's kind of because we all start based on soda pop. That's kind of what the nation is based on, is soda pop nation.
Right. And it's a Coca-Cola palate.
We have to go from that sweetness, and that's what was really happening back in the 70s with the Riesling thing, is they're really getting into that. If once you become a super pro and your wines, you go as dry as you can get. So having these people say that to me now, I'm like, oh, you know what? These wines are all sweet in their own ways. Think about the fruit that you eat. Is it really sugary? No. Is it really? But does it have these really great fruit flavors? Yes. And it changes people's perception. I was filling in it for my friend at a tasting bar one time, and I said that, and the lady came back the next day and she bought 3 cases of this stuff. She was from Michigan. Wow. And so if I can change the Michigan people, everyone's going to learn, eventually. It's fun.
I love that. We want to talk about some specific wines today, but before we move into any of that, do you have another fun interview or a fun encounter you've had through wine? Because you've had so many. One that stands out in your mind, whether it was an interview that you did or just an experience you had?
The greatest experience I've ever had, and he just passed away recently, was Mikhail Gorbachev, the great leader of Russia.
Yes.
In the Soviet Union. It was at up when Moon Mountain Wine, it used to be called Moon Mountain Winery. Before that, it was Carmenet. So you guys see that Carmenet that's $9.99 on the racks. It's not the same.
Right.
We're talking about a very high-end brand at that point.
I remember that winery.
Yeah, it is really great. It's up on the mountains. And so I did a lot of the service stuff that I did. Sommeliers got to be great servers, and so wineries would have me come in as a guest sommelier and server for top tables, and I didn't know anything about this, so I got there, and I'm used to a lot of cars being there because it's a big deal. There were 2 buses and 1 big limo, and it's way up in the mountains. Believe me, it's not the easiest drive. And so we get up there, or I get up there, and I walk in, and they're like, "Oh, Chris, you got table 1, and Randall, the winemaker, who's my great friend. I just did a show with him this week, and he's one of my best buddies. We went to University of California, Davis together. He was an econ major, and I was a sociology major, and look at us now. But what happened was, Mikhail Gorbachev was there, and he really was interested in the wines I was pouring for him. I was doing my best to kind of talk to him because he didn't know English very well, but he was here. He lived in the consulate in San Francisco for about a year after he retired from politics, and he was really raising money for really great charities and things like that. So that's for him, that was a great thing. Now the dinner ends, and everyone just files out except for him and his. They're in 2 buses, so they're all getting on their buses, and they have all contributed to this nice cause that he wanted to raise some money for. and but they're still there, him and his bodyguards. And so one of the bodyguards runs upstairs and says, "Oh my God, they have whiskey!" And all the rest of them run downstairs. So now it's just Michaela and me talking about Cabernet Franc up in the mountain
Wow.
by ourselves for about 20 minutes, where it was just him and I. I mean, that was
That's
a
amazing.
magical moment. I will definitely say that it's kind of impossible to replicate. I've had great times with, John Travolta, Bruce Willis, Susan Sarandon. I told Jacqueline Bisset how much I had a crush on her when I was a kid. You know, Sharon Stone used to be at the Getty's a lot, and she's like, "Oh, Chris, come here. I need to talk to you." And so, of course, I would go to her and talk to her. So I had an amazing experience, with John Lasseter and Nancy Lasseter and all the great things I got to do for them, especially in their cellar. It was a really funny story, actually. So Francis Ford Coppola was over with his wife, Eleanor, and she was just amazing. And both of them were there. He loved the dinner, and he said, "Chris, do you have a crab pick here?" And I was like, "Oh, crab pick? You just had, ossobuco, man." Okay, but I was like,
You still
okay.
hungry?
So I asked Nancy, I'm like, "Do we have a crab pick?" And she said, "Yeah, we do. So go find it." So he just wanted the blood, the bone marrow. He just wanted to pick that bone. And so we had a bottle of Chateau Yquem, a full bottle of that, and then they
nice.
left. And John and Nancy and I went in the cellar, and we just basically drank the rest of that bottle, and it was great. But he told me how he met Francis Ford Coppola, and it was when in the old days, we're talking about the 80s, where they would have these like kind of barbarian like dinners and stuff, or parties in Hollywood, and it's where you just lay on mats and on the ground, and people would come and feed you. You didn't even use your hands, they were feeding you. So I mean,
So hedonistic.
Okay, now I'm getting the whole bone marrow thing. Okay, cool. But it took a whole bottle of Chateau Yquem to tell me the story, but I like that Chateau Yquem.
That's great.
So,
well, Chris, you are making us thirsty, so I think we need to drink. What do you say?
So, like I told you guys, I really wanted you to pick out some Pinot Noirs, because Pinot Noir is my favorite grape of them all, and it's for a variety of reasons. It's I mean, the wines that are produced with it are spectacular. It's one of the greatest regions of the world in Burgundy, but I think a lot of people out there do not realize how great Pinot Noir is. It is the father of Chardonnay. Chardonnay would not exist if this grape did not exist. Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio, same thing. Pinot Blanc, Malbec, or sorry, not Malbec, Petit Verdot, and those ones are not related. But Pinot Meunier, on the other hand, which is the third grape you can actually use in champagne, is directly related to it, and so is Gamay. So any of that, Beaujolais Nouveau stuff that you get was because of Pinot Noir. So it's a great grape, and I just, when you think about it versus Cabernet's great, but it's two grapes crossed together, and it's Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. They were crossed together from the Loire Valley, taken down to Bordeaux. So it doesn't really have that much history. This one is about an indigenous grape of France that really has changed the world. It's pretty amazing.
Yes.
So what are you guys drinking?
Let's see. I'll go.
Okay.
I have this fabulous 2017 Pinot Noir from Waite's Mast. And I got to meet Brian Mast this past weekend. There's a great wine event called Palm Springs Pinot Fest, and they have a grand tasting called Passion for Pinot. And Brian was there. I got to meet him. That was the first time. But his winemaker, Shalini Secker, has been a guest on our podcast. So y'all have to go back and listen to that episode. But so I got to meet Brian. What I have right after that, because Mary and I taped that interview with Shalini in person, and she poured us the 2017 Oppenlander Vineyard Pinot Noir, and I just loved it so much. I had to go out and buy some, which I did, and I still have one bottle left. But so I've opened that, and it's just gorgeous. It's so earthy and vibrant. It has this verve to it that just makes you want to go back for another sip and another sip. And what was fun about talking to Brian is he was also pouring a white Pinot Noir, which I said, I'm starting to see more of this. And Chris, I want to see if you've been seeing white Pinot Noir, but I just love this wine.
I love that brand. That is an amazing brand. Up from, Anderson Valley, which is so close to me here in Sonoma County where I live. And I was born and raised here. So it's every time I get the chance to go up to Anderson Valley, which is in Mendocino County and out towards the coast, I will take advantage of that. So I know Brian and his wife so well. And I think that's a really special area that, it's come on a lot. I've been working on a book about let's not go into the 2000s yet, 1983, and about the making of 19 appellations on the West Coast. It was the largest amount of appellations ever made on the West Coast, and it was three. It was the third year of the appellations. The first one was Sonoma Valley and Napa Valley were involved in that, and Santa Cruz Mountains and some of the, Amador counties, up in there in the mountains from there too. But this one was really special because it had a lot of the cool climate regions in it, and Anderson Valley is one of them. And this is really fun to kind of talk about that area. And I'll be up there actually next week going to the white grape variety tasting up there. But let me just say this: when they got that, when they were granted an appellation, their whole books, what they wrote out for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the federal people that had to approve this, is that they had 500 acres of white grapes. They had 57 acres of Pinot Noir. Actually, I think it's even less than that. I think it was 54. Today, they still have 500 acres of white grapes, but they have about 3,400 acres of Pinot Noir. So from 57 to 3,400, that's kind of a little bit of growth.
It is.
So
unbelievable.
Wonderful area. And the Oppenheimer that you have is actually above that. It's on the ridge up there going out towards the coast. So I love those wines so much.
Oh, that's great. So Mary B,
right.
what's in your glass?
All right, we're going to head to Carneros. And this wine that I wanted to talk to you about is from one of California's just most beloved wine couples. It's their estate vineyard. And I'm talking about James Hall and Ann Moses, their Patson Hall 2021 Pinot Noir. And it is just a lovely wine, really kind of savory.
Yeah.
It has like black cherry flavors, but also savory, like anise,
Yes.
even clove, and just a darker Pinot than you sometimes see. And yet the taste really smooth and velvety, and the outstanding quality you would expect from a Patson Hall wine. So it doesn't disappoint, and none of their wines ever disappoint, honestly.
Never. And it's a really interesting story with them. They were they were really ahead of the game as far as vineyard designates. So they would do like certain vineyards that no one knew anything about, but they were getting them and they would put them on the labels. And there was like stuff like the San Giacomo's and their Chardonnay that they do, or the Chenoweth family vineyard way out there, or all these kinds of things that they were getting the fruit from them, and really acknowledge that wine that you have is from their house vineyard. So that must mean a lot to them. I mean, that's like, you can't screw up that, when it says the name of the winemaker and the wife's last name too on there. And this is actually kind of a funny thing that one time a really great guy told me, and It was the owner of Three Sticks Winery, Bill Price III, and he said, when I go into restaurants, Chris, and I can't really decide, they've got way too many Pinots or Chardonnays or something like that, I always get the one with the last with a name of the family member in it, so like that they're not going to screw that up. So
That's a really good little slide tip.
I know he's a very
insider.
smart guy, that guy. And once again, Carneros, 1983, it was granted to be an appellation as well. In fact, Carneros has one of the deepest histories of Pinot Noir. It goes back to the 1870s, and it was Judge, oh God, why am I spacing? Judge Stanley Ranch there, which is now home of an auberge resort. Hello. So it's really cool. But, that property was the first one where it really was successful, about 50 acres of Chardonnay and 50 acres of Pinot Noir in that same property. And it kind of went through Prohibition. It wasn't really pulled out. And Louis M. Martini actually purchased that property. And through them, he did some really great projects with University of California, Davis, where I went to school. Go Aggies. And because of that, the Pommard clone came in there in 1951. Dr. Olmo, who's an amazing guy, one of my legendary heroes, brought in from that region in Burgundy the Pommard clone, and they propagated it there, and that's where it came from. And it's 1951. That's the first real clone of Pinot Noir that was really acknowledged. And they also did the Martini clone, and the Wente clone was also tested there. So there's some really interesting things about Carneros, and it goes way back to the 1870s about the history of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in California.
Well, this book you're writing sounds really fascinating. What stage are you at with it, and how when might we see this released?
Yeah, about halfway through. Back in 2013, I did a series for Wine Business Monthly, and it was just, it was the only series they've ever done like this, where it was a 10-part series based on California. And it really goes into the different appellations. Russian River is one of them, and Anderson Valley, Santa Ynez Valley, which is Santa Barbara County, is part of it. Up in the Sierra foothills, you have El Dorado is one of them that was based there. Paso Robles was 1983, you guys. And after a while, just knowing a lot about these areas and knowing 1983, I just started crossing the patterns. I was like, oh, wait a second. What was 1983 all about? What was going on here? And so I found out all these things, and that's why I bring up my wine that I've got here, which is the Sokol Blauser 2018 Old Vineyard Block from Dundee Hills up in Willamette Valley, Oregon, which also was granted in 1983. Isn't that fun that we all three of us grabbed great Pinot Noirs from 1983, like when the appellations were granted for each one of these in different areas in 1983. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. And, we didn't even consult with each other.
I know. I just said Pinot, you guys. Let's do Pinot. I mean, believe me, I would have liked to have brought in Rosé too, because I think that when you get into Pinot Noir rosés and things like that, they're a little bit different, but we never had rosés 20 years ago. But they've really moved a lot, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. But this is a Sokol Blauser. This is the 50-year anniversary of this. This was during the COVID time, and I remember being down here in the cellar, kind of watching the Zoom with Susan Sokol Blauser, who's really one of my favorites. But I got to tell you guys one thing about, I could go on forever about Willamette, but one of these things that why, Burgundy, the grapes came here to California. It made a lot of sense. We had a lot of warm climate areas. So smart people, think about Europe. It's not really as hot as California, a lot of the areas. So there were a lot of people that pushed it out towards the coast. Other ones stayed interior, like Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley. these really hotter areas, and that's where Cabernet became popular. But other ones were going out towards the coast, and this is in the 1880s, 1890s, and this was like California was really established before Prohibition, and when the 60s came along and Pinot became popular on a small scale than it is today, but we knew we could plant out there, so that was great. But Willamette Valley is a completely different story because no one had any faith in that area up there. It was like too cold. No one's ever going to grow anything, no consistency or anything. But when you really think about Pinot Noir, it is the most fragile of all grapes. It can't be grown in that hot of weather if you really want to produce a great wine. And this was the second layer of people that really went there is the Sockel-Blauser family. And that is after UC Davis graduates, including the great David Lett. And David Lett went there in 1965 and planted the first grapes. So its history really goes back to 1965. So if you guys are listening to this, broadcast here in 2025, that would mean that it is a 60-year anniversary of Willamette Valley and the history. That's all they have. And what they've done, and they have 1,000 wineries, and they had to do a big scale kind of appellation because what they had to do is to define it in the smaller zones over time. And so this second group that got there in the early 70s, a lot of them, believe it or not, you guys, Stanford grads, believe it or not. So Stanford University, what did you do on the weekends? You went up to Ridge Winery up on the hill there, or Domaine Eden, or some of these places there, and you went, oh my God, wine is so good. I want to go into agriculture. Stanford was very smart school back then, but it also had a little bit of the hippie movement and stuff in it. So some of these people, like Susan Sockel-Blauser and her husband at the time, decided, you know what, we can't afford anything in California. Let's go up there to the north where they've proven that it can ripen, but you got to be very patient on it. But let's go up there. So them and the Ponzis and a few other families came from Stanford University and going up north. So it came, the tradition came from Burgundy, came to California, and then it went north. So It's really crazy.
That is crazy. So I have to ask you about another grape variety that you are a really big champion of, and it may surprise people, but it's Zinfandel.
Yep, you betcha. It is my second favorite grape to Pinot Noir, and it's because Zinfandel is really the tradition of making wines in California. Last year, which was 2024, was the 200-year anniversary of the planting of the first grapes up here in Sonoma County and Napa Valley, or anywhere up in the north. And it was by the missionaries that came up. That was the mission grape. But that goes back to 1824. But when the big gold rush hit and brought people from all over the world here, there really wasn't a grape. We have no indigenous grapes in California. So how did we get so great? It's actually because Zinfandel was the first grape that was proven here. And the thing is that these vines can last forever. Cabernet, as much as I love Cabernet, those vines last 40 years. In some ways, we're paying for them to pull them out. These can outlive human beings. They can outlive generations. So when you have old vine Zinfandel from the 1880s, when that was planted, that great-great-grandfather's, spirit is still inside that bottle. I mean, they were the ones that planted it. So they have flavors that are very unique. I'll say one little quick story there is we used to have Rockwall Winery over in Alameda, which was one of the great ones that Kent Rosenblum, one of my heroes, founded. And there's a good story coming up here in the San Francisco Chronicle about the 25-year anniversary of the San Francisco Chronicle wine competition, which Kent Rosenblum was a great member of, and how I judged with him and his daughter one year. And it was just the three of us as the judging team. And I got invited to her wedding because I was now a member of the family. And so it goes way back there. But, this is like the tradition of really bringing this together. It was a really great seminar that we had there at Rockwall because of ZAP, which is the Zinfandel Advocates and Producers, and it
Mhm.
was Tim Fish, who's the great writer for the Wine Spectator, and he really wanted for us to kind of taste what was happening, what was new. And in the old days, I think you'll remember this, Mary, like 20 years ago, some of these wines were pretty porty. That means
Mhm.
they were like almost like 18%
Yeah.
alcohol. They were
Yeah,
big. Like,
they were
I mean, if
big.
you get some roadkill, maybe call me. But like, other than that, not really useful for much except
Exactly.
for getting
Mm.
drunk really fast. And
Mhm.
that's not really what it was intended for. So I think that really one of the wines that blew me away there was one that I tasted and I went, wow, that's really precious. There's like wild strawberries and pepper, and wow, what is this? That was Turley, and it was from a vintage that was from Russian River Valley in an old gnarly vine vineyard there. And Turley had been one of those ones that Robert Parker really liked those wines
Mhm.
a lot. But to be really honest, they were not drinkable. They were like, if like really it was steak only and those kinds of things. But really, what Tegan Pasalacqua, who became the new winemaker there,
Mhm.
really started doing these things, and it was 14.1% alcohol, amazingly tasting.
Mm.
And I feel like that moment changed what Zinfandel was. Today we can do it with, I was talking to one of the producers recently who does for Chez Panisse, like their wine is the house wine of Chez Panisse for 37 years. It's green and red, Zinfandel.
Really? Wow.
And you know what? That wine is low in alcohol and it goes with everything at Chez Panisse. That's pretty amazing what we've done with food and food culture and how Zinfandel has adapted to that.
Oh,
Well,
that's
and
awesome.
I think lower alcohol is just resonating with everybody, and for good reason recently. And as you said, like some of those big alcohol wines, they just kind of burn your taste buds, you know?
Well, they make people do things that they're not supposed to do, and it's chewing and tannins and
Yeah.
these things. It's supposed to be a pleasurable experience, not a hardship.
Mhm.
And that's
Mm.
why even with Cabernets and how they're making them today and adding water and spinning them in some cases, just because people want that big flavor, but like that's too much science. Why don't you just use the grapes, and just
Mhm.
and I think that's really picking a little bit early, better acidity, preserves the freshness. Believe me, down here in the cellar, I have a lot of old wines, and I love opening old wines. And people say, well, it's good for 5 years to 10 years. Screw that. If it's low in alcohol and high in acidity, it's going to be great for 30 years
Yeah.
if you keep it right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
true. Wow. Well, Chris, we could talk to you for hours and
Yeah.
hours.
I want to talk to you guys for
I
hours.
know we
I
do.
gotta be
Awesome.
back on the show.
We will
You're
have to do part two.
It's
Yes.
so true. Like your love of wine
Yeah.
and people and experience, it just shines through in every sentence. I'm telling you, you are infectiously joyful about wine, and it's just so fun to listen to you. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, you guys. I do want to say one more thing about Pinot real quick
Sure.
is the Petaluma Gap here in Sonoma County. I did actually create the name for that appellation. So anytime you guys see me on the label, it says Petaluma Gap.
Mhm.
I'm known as the Godfather of the Gap. So
Yes,
I
you are.
figure the sommelier to the stars, Godfather of the Gap. I put that on my tombstone. Don't even put my name. And if you knew me, that's cool. If you didn't, then screw you.
Dang.
But no, just kidding there. But what I get to do for the Sonoma County Vintners here in Sonoma County, and really these great events that I'm putting on, it's really exactly what we were just talking about, you guys. Is getting these people that I know so well out in the public more often, and we're doing a great Cabernet one coming up here. We've got two Pinot ones. The first one's just based on Pinot, and the second one is Pinot Chard. Some of these people, like we were just talking about, Patson Hall will definitely be in there, but Literai and Costa Brown and all these kinds of brands that we have here
Yeah.
in Sonoma County. We have diversity, and I was so lucky to grow up here. So that's really what I give the credit to is just how lucky I was to grow up here in Sonoma County and to really be able to explain these things to so many different people and get them so excited about wine.
Oh,
That's awesome. I mean,
yes.
and As I said, it's not an event until SawyerSomm shows up.
Love
So
you,
yeah,
Mary. I know
thank
we
you
got
for
to get
showing up for
selfies
us
here.
today.
I
Yeah,
know.
you got it. My pleasure. Cheers
All
again.
right. Have a
All
good one
right.
and cheers to you. Sip, sip, hooray, Chris.
Sip, sip, hooray.
Well, Mary B., I mean, we just barely touched the surface of what Chris Sawyer does and his stories, which can go on for hours and hours.
Yeah, I mean, the perfect guy to share a bottle of wine with, just because he's not only going to tell you about the wine, he's going to tell you fascinating stories about his life, about the lives of the people who made the wine and other cool things that happened in that growing region. I mean, goodness, it just goes on and on. But Chris is a delight, and I truly enjoyed getting to know him today.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening, if you see an event that Chris is involved in, you want to go to that event. You want to drink what he's drinking. And we'll definitely have to get him back when his book comes out.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Sip Sip Hooray as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. I mean, goodness, the laughs. And this is, stuff even that we weren't recording was just outrageously hilarious, and the people that Chris has interacted with. But such a fun episode for us. And if you liked it, we hope that you will rate us, share it, be social with it, let your friends know about our episodes and about Sip Sip Hooray, because that is truly how we make it happen and how we grow this thing.
And now on Spotify, you can make comments on specific episodes, not just the show. So tell us how much you loved hearing from Chris today. And be sure to follow us on social. We're at Sip Sip Hooray Podcast. We will have show notes about the episode, about the wines we tasted with Chris, and where you can find him at our website, sipsiphooray.podcast.com, and also on Substack. Be sure to follow us there. You'll get an instant notification as soon as a new episode drops.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Mary, I've really enjoyed it. I hope you have a glass of wine and just sit back and reflect on all the fun stuff we talked about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, cheers to you.
Cheers, Mary. Sip, sip, hooray.